Hello, everyone. Hello, how are you? Today, I want to talk about that important little document called the cover letter. A bunch of my clients recently have asked me, do cover letters still matter? Some of the applications they put through seems to not require cover letter. In simple terms, yes. Even if they do not get read, it's still important to include them. And here's why. So studies in employer preferences indicate that HR managers still want to see them, and some consider them critical in their decision to hire. And then there was also a career builder study I read, which suggested that over 50% of HR managers consider the cover letter the second most important thing to give your application a boost, with the number one thing being a customized resume. So yes, they still matter. It's still important to include them. Now, there are application tracking systems that don't allow you to submit a cover letter. And that's the only time I would suggest you obviously don't include it. Everywhere else, it is better to produce a cover letter and add it to your application. So a lot of recruiters won't read, but they still expect to see them. Why? It's a contradiction, isn't it? They don't necessarily read them, but they still expect to see them. And here's why. Hiring managers often want, and it's that easy. So a recruiter will still want to see a cover letter because if a hiring manager requests it, it's super easy to then simply pass on one. And that's something you always need to remember, is to always make it super easy for the reader, the recruiter, and the hiring manager. Make it super easy for them to say yes to you. So you don't want to get to a point where you go, oh, well, the recruiter's probably not going to read it. I won't submit a cover letter with my application. And then the hiring manager comes back and says to the recruiter, where's the cover letter? I'd like to see a cover letter. And now the recruiter go back to you and ask you to submit a cover letter. So making things difficult for a recruiter or for your hiring manager and not having a full application as it's expected, and most hiring managers still expect to see a cover letter, is obviously going to stack the deck against you. So my recommendation to people, give more rather than less. So even if you believe that the cover letter is not necessary, think in terms of just in case. Add one just in case someone wants to see it. So an optional cover letter is not actually optional if you're serious about landing the role. So if you see one of those jobs, often we see on job search engines and job boards, you might get an ad that says, when you click the apply button, it says cover letter optional. The moment they make something optional, err on the side of including it, because it shows that you're willing to do that little bit extra to demonstrate your value to the company, and that you're also aware of what is expected, and that you're using that just in case situation. Just in case a hiring manager wants it, make sure it's there anyway, so you don't have to go through another step or another process, or the recruiter doesn't have to come back to you and say, actually, the hiring manager wants to see a cover letter. So, err on the side of caution and include it. Cover letters can be used to explain your gaps in job. So normally, sometimes if you have to produce a resume and you have a fair bit of detail, but you still want to keep your resume super tight, you won't necessarily have room to explain the gaps in your working career. So cover letter is a great place where you can use to explain the gaps. It also showcases, here's one of the most important reasons cover letters are still important. It showcases your understanding of the job selection criteria. So the cover letter is the space where you get to use some words from the job ad back to the employer. So the employer puts up an ad, they use certain words, and one of the ways you stand out in a cover letter is to use some of that selection criteria words back in your cover letter. And that's how you demonstrate that you understand that selection criteria. So really, really important. The other important thing to remember about a cover letter is that it demonstrates your ability to introduce yourself in sharp, succinct, compelling ways. In other words, an elevator pitch. A cover letter is a little bit longer than an elevator pitch. Elevator pitches usually range, up to about 100 words. Cover letter is generally one page, between 350 and 450 words. That's the expectation. But you get to demonstrate your ability to sell yourself in a sharp, succinct, compelling way. A cover letter is also where you would be able to include your availability or your notice period. So generally speaking, we don't include that on a resume. So the cover letter is the place where you can include your notice period or your availability, your start date availability. So, there's a few reasons you're probably starting to see where it's useful to have a cover letter alongside your resume when submitting for a role. Also, if you're applying for a role via a referral, say, for example, someone works within that company, you might have a friend there or an ex-colleague, or, someone you worked with previously, and they referring you for the role. One of the ways you can grab that attention of that hiring manager reading your application is to mention the person's name who's referring you. So, a few little small reasons, but important reasons that a cover letter is really useful and can really boost an application. As I said, they need to be sharp, succinct, and compelling. The general expectation is that they are no longer than a page, between sort of 350 and 450 words. That's it. And as I also mentioned, some application tracking systems don't allow you to include a cover letter, and that's the only time you wouldn't include it. But I would always check. I always say to my clients that if an application tracking system or portal doesn't allow you to include a cover letter, take the initiative. Reach out to the recruiter and ask them, would you like a cover letter with my application? Provide your name and then, email them a cover letter so that they have something on hand in case the hiring manager or the hiring company wants to see it. So in simple terms, they still matter. Some of the key decision makers are gray hairs. My partner calls them that. So he hires for major projects in corporate ITC. And he said that a lot of the decision makers are still gray hairs, which means kind of old school, have done hiring and firing a certain way, and they still like to see cover letters. They want to see someone's capability of selling their value in short, sharp, compelling ways. So that's why they are still important. And as I mentioned, you're better off adding one than not having one. And there's mixed views on it. Some people say, oh, it's not necessary anymore. I've even heard some recruiters say, oh, it's not necessary anymore. And maybe that's true for some recruitment agencies. But one of the things I've seen in working with hiring managers myself, because I still work with some of them, they always want to see. So do yourself a favor when applying for a role. Always think in terms of what the hiring manager or the final decision maker wants to see. Err on the side of caution. Better to do it than not. So that's my few little tips on cover letters. And if you have any comments or any other topic to cover, feel free to direct message me or to comment wherever you're seeing this video. And I wish you all the best in your job search and job applications. We are in super tight markets, and so stack the deck in your favor. Have customized resumes for your applications and a sharp, succinct cover letter to boost your application. Have a great day. Bye for now.